Okay, so Phenotype February week 3. Can't believe how fast time passes, but we just finished week 3 of Phenotype February, and this is what happened. We focused our discussion and our work on Parkinson's disease, led by Dr. Allan Wu, who's not with us today because he's busy in clinic. But I'll brief you all. Dr. Allan Wu is interested in phenotyping Parkinson's disease for a very interesting use case. They are working on promoting for a registry that is state-wise, and they were coming up with definition to be used in the registry. So that's why he is working with us to come up with a phenotype that they can use. They are implementing 2 definitions out of prior work in the literature. So the discussion on the forum started with how we can implement these 2 definitions. There was a lot of discussion of how to implement some ideas related to what is a proper date of a cohort start date, a lot of views both on the technical side of how to implement things in Atlas and also conceptual side of how can this affect our analyses down the stream. So very interesting discussion there. Where we are there, Dr. Wu finished implementing the 2 definitions from the literature. We have them both in Atlas, and we already went through an evaluation session of one of them, and using cohort diagnostic, we already concluded that at least the first definition that is based on a unanimity publication going to have maybe a problem with sensitivity error in some of the databases that we ran the definition on. So that was very, very interesting, and we are continuing on the evaluation and the peer review for the Parkinson's disease phenotype. We also had that evaluation session recorded. That's the URL you see here on the slide, and it's also available in the website that Craig has already shared with everybody. So if anybody is interested of how we went on evaluating one of the definition from Dr. Wu, you can totally see the recording on that session that happened last week. We also started or already working on myocardial infarction. Dr. Mirza Khan, are you on the call with us today?
Yeah, I'm here.
Thank you so much. We are very interested and very excited about the work and the update and the progress we made on myocardial infarction. I know last week you gave us the use case and how you already started working. Can you give us an update of where we are in phenotyping myocardial infarction?
Do you want me to just give like a high level overview? Or
Yes, your reflection, where you are in the process, how you feel about things, and what's our next steps?
Yeah. So I guess kind of on the high level, we've kind of broken things down into, these kind of, I would say like building blocks or Lego pieces based on, the different observations that we have available to us, be it like ICD codes, but also kind of understanding the context of these clinical care process maps with myocardial infarction in particular. And we focused on, acute ST elevation myocardial infarction, which is like the bad version of it, which you need to act in a very timely manner. And so these, regardless of where you are, tend to be very well pericalized. And so we can kind of look and say like, okay, you got a troponin, you got an EKG, you got these XYZ medications, intervention, so on and so forth. And so we not only looking at the ICD codes, we also kind of were able to break them down into procedure, medications, et cetera, and try to then build those phenotypes based on these building blocks, so to speak, to kind of see how things worked. And the other layer to that was we looked at, different data sets and seeing how the performance of these phenotypes work, be it on claims data or be it on EHR-based data. And, thus far, as we're running these, we're learning a lot of important things that I think are relevant to end users who have access to these different data sets, because ultimately that is going to influence your decision on which building block you're going to use. So for instance, lab measurement values are missing by and large in claims data sets, right? And so using the troponin level threshold as a cutoff to say, oh, this is a positive case is probably not going to be what you want to be using if you have access to a claims data set. Whereas, if you have EHR measurement values will be a little bit more bang for your buck. And so putting all these things together to see where the highest yield is, but also kind of understanding the context of what data set you have available to you I think becomes very important, right? So I'm a cardiovascular outcomes researcher, and so I think about how we can then use these things as building blocks, but it's also kind of understanding what data sets you have available to you to be able to do that.
That's great, and that actually a great example, like in real life, that is related to the discussion we had this week on the standardized versus customized approach for phenotype development and evaluation. We had a debate on the forum, and the question really came into how do you deal with different data sources that have different domains or different elements, and what do you do in a context of a network study? Do you have two definitions? Do you have both definitions or both phenotypes? And I think that my example demo that very nicely, because you did by breaking down into these different domains, which if you all remember Patrick's representation of what a phenotype is and how we're trying to capture that journey depending on different domain of data, labs, procedures, diagnoses, and how different databases come across these different elements of data. And then what do you do in terms of standardized phenotyping and how that affects the measurement error. So that discussion, that debate on the forum was very interesting. And I think myocardial infarction will provide us a great example instead of talking about, in an abstract, in an absence of an example, what do we really do and how our different data sources in the network are going to be a place where you use myocardial infarction and what that means. So thank you very much. And for those people who provided feedback on the debate, that was very, very interesting. The debate continues because that particular debate on how we work on standardizing phenotypes, whether in a use case dimension or the data source dimension, is very important for us in the phenotype development and evaluation group. As we're building our phenotype, we really need to understand what is the best structure that would help the community use these phenotypes and going forward. So thank you everyone for providing your input, and please continue to do that. Now we're gonna go on our current week and what's happening this week with Gowtham.
So what is happening this week? This week we are working on a really important challenge. Being parents, to learn to use the science that we have access to and the data that we have access to, learn about outcomes of such young people is a brave step. So Dr. Khyzer is helping us learn about neonatal hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy. As you all remember, we have used a framework where the hardest and the toughest phenotype is at the end. And this is the hardest and one of the toughest phenotype I've ever seen. So Dr. Khyzer is supported by Dr. Evan Minty, and they are true friends, PHRIENDs, friends. And they're working together on developing and evaluating this phenotype. So Dr. Khyzer or Dr. Evan Minty, are you on the call? Would you be able to give us an update?
Yeah. Can you guys hear me? This is Khyzer Aziz, and I'm just grateful just for the opportunity to talk about this phenotype and work with the Odyssey community on this phenotype, because in just hearing this call in general, it seems like we're all facing the same problems. And when you're developing a phenotype from scratch for a novel population, specifically babies, some of our tiniest patients, it's a lot of work from scratch, and it's very interesting where we could use a lot of the solutions that are already provided with the Odyssey community. And just hearing Dr. Mirza right now just describe, depending on the data set that you're using, if you're using an EHR data set versus a claims data set, and the discussion last week about how you develop a phenotype, for which database are you developing this phenotype, you could either use diagnosis codes, procedures codes, labs, measurements. And with this HIE phenotype, these babies ideally should just go home with their parents right after delivery, but they end up being sick, something unexpected happens at delivery, and then they end up staying in the hospital and then generating millions of data points. Some are waveform data, some are lab data, some are measurements, some are diagnosis, some are procedure codes. And then this is where just going through the historical posts in general, right, in terms of timeline, cohort entry event, exit event, age. So this is where, even though this is a novel area, we can use the Odyssey tools because age of my patients is right off the bat. They're admitted at birth. So time zero truly is time zero, age zero. In terms of sensitivity and specificity, depending on how we go about tackling this. So for sensitivity, brain disorder, because this is a type of brain injury. So any procedure code, diagnosis code for brain injury in itself will be sensitive enough to pick up the patients of interest, but the specificity there would be low. But if in theory you have a diagnosis of hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy, which is never used lightly, so if you're getting that diagnosis, it's very specific. In terms of treatment as a procedure, therapeutic hypothermia is the only intervention available. So if you have that procedure code and you're the right age and it's the initial event, so it's highly specific. And this is where working with Dr. Evan Minty, who truly is a friend and just working through this, we actually have the gold standard chart review done in terms of from our neurosciences intensive care nursery, where we've been running this program for over a decade. So I actually know the counts. I actually know the procedures. I actually know the measurements. And we can actually tweak our cohort based off different definitions and see the results. So it's very exciting in real time. And now the next step of our work is really going after the cohort diagnostics and building this phenotype multiple ways for multiple users, regardless of database, regardless of data set. Because in this population, one of the limitations has always been everyone works locally, not globally. And this is, with Odyssey community, a real opportunity to actually make an impact for this disease group, for these patients. So just excited.
Thank you, Dr. Khyzer. And Evan, are you on the call? Do you have anything to say?
I can't really build on that. I've learned a lot by doing this. I'm really glad there's people like Dr. Aziz out there who have chosen to take care of the sickest little people. That's been one of the resounding feelings I've had while working on this. Is it's a real honor to be able to look at this data and reflect on the fact that, you know, as Khyzer said, this is really the when we talk about cohort entry events, this is their entry into our world, and it didn't go as smoothly as they deserved. And so I'm really excited to look to generate this phenotype to see if there's evidence that we can generate on an observational basis to make a difference.
Thank you both. Thank you for leading this. As a reminder to everybody on the call, we have worked on 10 phenotypes over the month of February. Some of them have been taken to done. Some of them are still going on. We still will be doing an Odyssey network study. So as soon as the definitions are in a certain stage of maturity, we'll call to action for the community to convert their work into an Odyssey network study. So if you are a data partner and are willing to be part of this study, we are looking to collaborate with you. That means the definition that Dr. Aziz and Dr. Minty are working on will be part of this network study. So thank you, everybody, for your support on this. This week, we also have a very important discussion that we want to have. How do we couple probabilistic and rule-based phenotyping in a systematic process to improve the development and evaluation of phenotypes? As you all know, most of us use the rule-based phenotyping tool called Atlas. But then we in Odyssey also have a probabilistic way of developing cohort definition. Dr. Huan Banda has pioneered a tool called Aphrodite. Huan, do you have a few minutes to talk about your thoughts on this?
Certainly. Hi, everybody. Yes, so we all been working with rules and doing cohorts in Atlas, which, you know, we all know that the main concern about that approach is that, you know, a patient can it's a binary thing, right? It's either on the phenotype slash cohort or it's not. And we all know that, you know, a lot of conditions appear over time, or some conditions, you know, depending on how incomplete the health record might be, you know, it's fussy, right? They might have 9 out of 10 things that the Atlas definition needs, but they're out. So, you know, the probabilistic phenotyping approach, you know, considers that and takes it to the point of, you know, using probabilistic, let's say, you know, for belonging into phenotypes, which is a little bit different than rigid rules. And last year, Phenotype February with Tiffin Callahan and Bill, we actually try to show what if we use both approaches, and and see what we could get out of building a machine learning model to identify people using the cohort identified with Atlas versus using one with Aphrodite, which Aphrodite only uses a set of a few codes or even keywords from the NodeNLP table, because it does work with stuff extracted in the NodeNLP table. And we actually came up with very interesting things when we take the Atlas cohort, we build a machine learning model with it using Aphrodite. Aphrodite can take Atlas cohorts, and you can just build any model that Caret supports. So we try that. We compared it against a purely probabilistic definition of a phenotype, meaning a couple of keywords, and just go and fetch patients, build a model. And we found that the cohorts themselves are very they overlap nicely, but also the valuable part that we were getting out of that is that there were features identified by the probabilistic model that a clinician might think, maybe I didn't consider that, it's not on the literature, but it's something that we see routinely in practice, so why not add that to the Atlas definition, right? So yeah, you're making it more rigid, but you're also making it more precise, right? So that's kind of what we looked at last year, and I would be very excited if other people decide to look the same at the same things, right? So from the phenotypes that we've done this year, why not try to build a probabilistic model or use the already defined Atlas cohort and see what other features we could use to improve the definition that's the rule-based definition, right? So that's kind of like the discussion. Well, that's basically the discussion that this thread and this week wants to set up. So hopefully there's people that have some insights, people that have some interesting comments, or people that could think, maybe you could do this other thing that, the people, some of the people that we work on probabilistic phenotypes didn't think about. So hopefully this invites people to get on discussion in the forum and, start providing ideas or thoughts.
Absolutely. Thank you, Juan. Thank you so much for leading this and for your insight on the probabilistic model and how it can inform rule-based model and the other way around. So as you all know, everybody, this is the last formal week. There are 4 weeks in a month, but this month we have the 5th week. So what are we going to do next week? And the next week we have 2 days. So next Tuesday, we're going to attempt to summarize the lessons that we have learned in the entire month of February. We're going to talk about how the application, how we started with 10 phenotypes, with 10 leads, and how we're going to roll into 10 papers. We're also going to talk about methods, the best practices that we have learned, and the measurement errors. So just a reminder, Phenotype February is just to help us frame the community's thinking around the problem of phenotyping. We won't stop this month. We will continue till the end of this year, till the next Phenotype February. So thank you for joining us on this journey.